When a global crisis hits, you can usually spot the generational divide in an instant. The younger generations panic. The older generations get angry.
This is madness.
And Generation X? They just let out a heavy sigh, put down their coffee, and get to work. It's a running joke on the internet that Gen X is the unbothered generation. But to clinical psychologists and sociologists, this isn't just a meme. It is a highly developed, deeply ingrained trauma response. Today, we are dissecting the psychology of Generation X. Why does chaos feel normal to them? And how did a childhood of total neglect forge the most crisis-resilient demographic alive? Born between 1965 and 1980, Gen X is currently aged 46 to 61. But more importantly, they are famously known as the Latchkey Kids. Because divorce rates skyrocketed and dual-income households became the norm, this generation was raised with virtually no adult supervision. From a neurological standpoint, this lack of supervision fundamentally altered their threat response. When a modern child gets hurt or scared, an adult immediately rushes over, validating the panic. But when a Gen X child fell out of a tree at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, there was no one around to panic with them. They had to process their own fear, self-soothe, and fix the problem entirely alone. Psychologically, they developed an incredibly high internal locus of control. This is the belief that you, and you alone, are responsible for the outcome of a situation. Nobody is coming to save you. So panicking is simply a waste of energy. But it wasn't just their empty houses that shaped them. It was the state of the world outside. Gen X grew up during the height of the Cold War. They did duck-and-cover drills under their school desks in case of a nuclear apocalypse. They watched the Challenger explode on live television in their classrooms. This constant, low-grade existential threat created a psychological phenomenon known as habituation. Habituation occurs when the brain is exposed to a stimulus so frequently that it stops responding to it. For Gen X, chaos wasn't an anomaly. Chaos was the baseline. It was just the background noise of their childhood. Because of this, Gen X developed a very specific worldview. Baby boomers were raised in the post-World War II economic boom, believing the world was inherently good and prosperous. Millennials were told they were special and could change the world. But Gen X? They expected things to break. Psychologists call this defensive pessimism. Defensive pessimists mentally prepare for the absolute worst-case scenario before it even happens. When the disaster actually strikes, they aren't shocked or paralyzed by anxiety because they already planned for it. To the outside world, it looks like apathy, but internally, it's extreme preparedness. And it wasn't just childhood trauma, it was economic whiplash. Gen X entered the workforce during the recession of the early 90s. Just as they gained their footing, the dot-com bubble burst. Then came the devastating 2008 housing crash right in their prime earning years. They've been financially rebuilding their entire adult lives. This resilience is also deeply tied to their historical timing. Gen X acts as the crucial bridge between analog and digital. They had an entirely analog childhood, but built the digital powerhouse we live in today. They remember what it was like to read physical maps and memorize phone numbers. Because they remember the before, they aren't reliant on the now. If the internet goes down, or the GPS stops working, or the digital grid collapses, younger generations experience acute distress. Gen X just shrugs. They possess an ultimate psychological safety net, the knowledge that they can survive perfectly fine without any of it. But this immunity to panic comes with a dark side. Because Gen X is so fiercely self-reliant and emotionally regulated during a crisis, society tends to take them for granted. They are the shock absorbers for everyone else's anxiety. In family dynamics and corporate environments, Gen X becomes the designated crisis manager. When things go wrong, everyone looks to them because they are the only ones not losing their minds. But being the strong one is exhausting. Many Gen X suffer from mild alexithymia, a psychological difficulty in identifying and expressing their own emotions. Because they were conditioned to suppress panic and just deal with it, they often don't know how to ask for help or articulate when they are actually hurting. They view emotional vulnerability as a liability. If you spend your entire life being the emotional anchor for your boomer parents and the steady rock for your millennial or Gen Z kids, you eventually forget how to let your own guard down. But despite the exhaustion, their cynical realism is arguably the healthiest mindset for the modern age. In a world currently obsessed with toxic positivity, the idea that you must be happy and optimistic all the time, Gen X offers a refreshing alternative. Their psychology says, the world is chaotic, systems fail, and people will let you down. And that is perfectly fine. We will survive it anyway. They don't need the world to be perfect to be okay. They just need to be left alone to handle it. Generation X may be the middle child of history, but in an era defined by global anxiety, economic instability, and digital burnout, their latchkey trauma has turned them into the exact demographic the world needs most. They aren't immune to pain, and they aren't entirely numb. They just know something the rest of us are still trying to figure out. Chaos isn't something you panic over. It's just something you manage. Are you a Gen X who feels totally at home in the chaos? Let us know your latchkey survival stories in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for our next deep dive into the psychology of generations.